I'm not supposed to be telling you this, but I need to. Malcolm-Jamal Warner told me, straight to my face, that they were planning his death. He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. And just days later, it happened. I know you're going to question everything I'm saying, but believe me when I tell you, I saw it unfold. It wasn't just a coincidence. He wasn't joking. You have to hear how it all went down. I didn't know Malcolm-Jamal Warner that well. We weren't close in the way you might think. Just acquaintances. People who knew each other through a circle of mutual friends. We'd cross paths at events, at gatherings, but there was always a distance between us, like there was something he was hiding. Or maybe it was just me. I never imagined that my life would be tied to his in such a twisted way. It all started in 2019. I was at an event. Nothing extraordinary. A small gathering, a handful of people from the entertainment world, casual conversations over drinks. But then, Malcolm showed up. He'd always been a bit reserved, kept to himself at these things, and I didn't think much of it. I wasn't the type to pry into his life, but that night, something felt different. He looked off. There was a certain tension in the way he held himself, like he was bracing for something. His eyes darted around the room, like he was scanning for danger. At first, I thought it was just stress or fatigue. But then, when he came over to talk to me, I saw it. The way he flinched when someone brushed past him, the way his hands trembled as he reached for his drink. He didn't seem like the man I had seen on TV. The confident, smooth Malcolm-Jamal Warner, the one who had been a fixture in pop culture, who had made a name for himself with a career that spanned decades, was gone. Instead, he looked like a man running from something. And he wasn't hiding it well. We talked for a while, small talk at first, but then, out of nowhere, he got serious. Too serious. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "They're planning it," he said. I remember those words, clear as day. They're planning it. I didn't know what he meant. I thought he was talking about his career, or maybe some project he was working on. But then he looked at me, his eyes wide with a kind of desperation that sent a chill down my spine. "No, you don't understand," he said, his voice barely audible. "They're planning my death. They've been planning it for months. And I'm next." I laughed, a nervous, uncomfortable laugh, because I didn't know what else to do. It didn't make sense. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment, was sitting here, telling me someone was planning his death. I thought it was a joke. I thought maybe he was messing with me or just venting about the pressures of his life. But the look in his eyes, the sheer terror there, it made me freeze. I didn't know what to say. I tried to change the subject, ask him if he was okay. He brushed it off, but the tension in the air didn't dissipate. It only got worse. I left that night, my mind spinning. I kept replaying his words over and over, but I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe it was just stress. People get paranoid. People say crazy things when they're under pressure. I figured Malcolm was just going through something, and I didn't want to make it worse by asking questions. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept seeing his face in my mind, the fear in his eyes, the way his voice trembled as he spoke those words. Days passed. I went on with my life, trying to forget it. But I couldn't. I couldn't forget the way he looked at me, like he was trying to tell me something, like he was trying to warn me. And then things started to get strange. It was a week later when I got the call. It was just after midnight, and I was lying in bed when my phone buzzed. The caller ID was blocked, but something told me to answer. I don't know why. Maybe I had a bad feeling, or maybe it was just a curiosity. Hello? I answered, my voice shaky. There was no response at first. Just silence, like someone was breathing on the other end of the line. Then a voice came through, low and distorted, almost like it was being filtered through some kind of device. It was hard to understand at first, but then the words became clearer. "You need to get out," the voice said. "You're not safe." I felt a cold chill run down my spine, but before I could ask who it was, the line went dead. I tried to dismiss it. I told myself it was just a prank. Maybe it was someone messing with me, or maybe I was just overreacting. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a random call. It felt too intentional, too dangerous. That's when the little things started to add up. The strange occurrences. The moments where I felt like I was being watched, like there was someone just out of sight, lurking in the shadows. And then I started seeing things that didn't make sense. I was walking down the street one afternoon, and I passed a man standing outside a coffee shop. He was staring at me, his eyes wide, unblinking. I looked away, but when I looked back, his gaze hadn't shifted. It was like he was studying me, waiting for something. I tried to brush it off, but when I turned the corner, I saw him again. This time, standing on the opposite side of the street, still staring. And it wasn't just him. Over the next few days, I started to notice more and more people like that. Strangers who seemed to know me, who seemed to be following me without saying a word. But it wasn't until I got a call from Malcolm's assistant that everything hit me. Malcolm was dead. They'd found him in his home, but it didn't look like an accident. It wasn't just a random tragedy. No, it was something else, something darker. And the worst part, I didn't know if I was next, but what happened next took things to a whole new level. I was almost relieved when I stepped inside. The air was cooler than I expected, the scent of fresh flowers still lingering in the entryway, trying to mask something deeper. I hadn't been in Malcolm's house for a while, but the memories came flooding back. How it used to feel like a home. It used to be filled with energy, warmth, his laughter echoing down the hallways, but now it felt vacant, hollow almost, like the space itself knew that something was wrong. Still, I couldn't shake the part of me that was grateful to be out of the oppressive heat of the outside world. I wasn't prepared for the way the house felt now. Silent. Too silent. Almost like it was holding its breath, waiting. The air felt heavier than it had before. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the low buzz of the overhead lights were the only sounds in the vast hallway. Everything in the house looked meticulously arranged, like it was frozen in time. The furniture stood exactly where it should, but it all looked strangely untouched, as if no one had lived here for weeks or longer. I forced myself to focus on the task at hand. I was here for one reason: to go through Malcolm's things. It seemed so mundane, so ordinary, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a constant low thrum of unease that made my hands sweat despite the cool air. The assistant who had greeted me at the door led me inside. She was acting different, her movements stiff and careful. She had a kind of nervous energy about her, something that didn't belong. She kept adjusting her hair, smoothing the sleeves of her shirt, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. Her smile was forced, tight-lipped, as if she were trying to convince herself that everything was normal. But I could see it in her eyes. The fear. Something was wrong. "Everything's just as Malcolm left it," she said with a forced cheerfulness that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was trying to mask the tension in the air, but it was impossible to ignore. I nodded, but didn't say anything. The words felt stuck in my throat, like the silence of the house had made everything feel too loud. We walked down the hallway, past the darkened rooms. There were no lights on, except for a single dim lamp in the corner of the living room. The low glow cast long shadows against the walls, distorting the shapes of the furniture, making them look almost too still, too rigid, as if the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I caught a glimpse of something strange. The picture frames along the hallway were tilted slightly, just enough that I could see the small gaps between them and the wall, like someone had moved them, like someone had been here and then hurriedly left. I felt an involuntary shiver pass through me, but I quickly pushed it aside. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. We reached the living room. It was vast and open, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a garden I couldn't see through the dark. The furniture was immaculate, too immaculate, actually. The chairs, the couch, everything in its exact place, but it all seemed stiff, out of place. Even the air felt too clean, as though the house had been scrubbed of any trace of its former life. I sat down on the edge of the couch, forcing a casual smile. "So, where do we start?" I asked, trying to break the tension. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she set a stack of papers down on the coffee table, her fingers brushing against the surface like she was avoiding something. Her movements were jerky, like she was forcing herself to do everything in slow motion. But there was something in the way she kept looking at the door, like she was expecting someone to show up. Or maybe, like she was waiting for something else entirely. "There's a lot to go through," she said finally, her voice strained. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable. I watched her for a moment, unsure of what to say. Her gaze flickered toward the windows, and I noticed her face tighten. She looked like she was about to speak, but then hesitated, as if unsure if it was a good idea. I glanced around the room, trying to fill the awkward silence. The walls were lined with bookshelves, heavy with books on film, photography, philosophy, everything that Malcolm had loved. There were framed photographs of his family, his career, and candid shots from the sets he had worked on. I didn't know much about his personal life, but seeing these images of him, captured in moments of happiness, made the emptiness in the room feel even more pronounced. The faces staring down at me, frozen in time, seemed so out of place in the current stillness of the house. A strange pressure settled over me, making my chest tight. I wanted to speak, to ask what was wrong, but I couldn't quite find the words. There was something in the air here, something I couldn't put my finger on. The silence felt oppressive, like the house itself was suffocating, trying to keep its dark secret hidden away. I felt a tug of unease, like a creeping sensation I couldn't shake. I turned my attention back to the assistant, who was still standing by the window, her arms crossed over her chest. Her body language was stiff, like she was preparing herself for something. I tried to ignore the odd feeling in my gut and focused on her again. "Are you sure everything's okay?" I asked, my voice lower than I intended. Her shoulders tensed immediately. She turned to me, her eyes wide, and her lips parted as if she was going to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she just shook her head slightly and looked away, her hands now wringing the edge of her shirt, as if she couldn't hold herself still. The atmosphere in the room thickened, pressing in on me. The stillness, the heaviness, it was all-consuming, making it hard to breathe. I didn't know why, but I felt like I shouldn't be here. The air felt wrong. Every noise felt magnified, from the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my feet to the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Even the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to echo, louder than normal. I stood up, needing to move. My legs felt restless, as if they were trying to outrun the tension in the room. The assistant didn't seem to notice, still staring out the window. I took a few steps toward the hallway, passing by a framed photo of Malcolm and his family, the same picture that had caught my eye earlier. It wasn't the image itself that made me pause, but the way the glass glinted in the low light. Just a little too much. I stepped closer to it, and that's when I saw it. The photo was crooked. Just barely, but enough that it made me stop. I could have ignored it, could have kept walking, but something about it made me uneasy. I reached up to adjust it, my hand brushing against the frame, but as I touched it, I froze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, the air turning colder, sharper. I pulled my hand away quickly. Something wasn't right. Here. I turned around to ask the assistant what had happened, what was going on. But before I could speak, the door to the room suddenly creaked open. My heart jumped into my throat. But no one was there. The door swung back and forth gently as if someone had just walked out. It wasn't that strange. It was an old house after all, but the sound of it, the way it moved. I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been deliberately opened. I looked back at the assistant, but she was gone. The living room, once filled with the sense of Malcolm's life, was now silent again. It wasn't a peaceful kind of quiet. It was an empty quiet. And just like that, the illusion of comfort had shattered. What came next was even more shocking. The unease didn't fade. If anything, it only intensified as I continued moving through the house. The living room felt like it was pressing in on me. The walls too close, the air too thick. I didn't want to stay there any longer, but I told myself I had to. I had a job to do. Malcolm's assistant had asked me to come here for a reason, to sort through his things, to help put the pieces together. But everything felt off. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I tried to shake it off, tried to focus on the task at hand. I walked around the house looking for a place to start, but I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept drifting back to that locked room, the one that I hadn't seen yet. The door at the end of the hallway, tucked behind an old bookshelf, the one I hadn't noticed before. It was strange, though. There was a heavy tension in the air around it, like I wasn't supposed to know it was there. I hadn't even touched the door yet, but the mere sight of it sent a chill up my spine. It didn't match the rest of the house. Everything else was pristine. designed for show. But that door, it seemed off. It looked too old. The wood was cracked, worn, and there was a feeling around it, like it was hiding something. I didn't want to think about it, but it was hard to ignore. As I stood there, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see the assistant walking down the hall, her face tight, her expression distant. She didn't meet my eyes. In fact, she seemed to go out of her way to avoid looking at me. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, and there was something in the way her hands gripped the edges of her cardigan, pulling it tighter around herself, like she was trying to hold something in. "Are you all right?" I asked, breaking the silence. She paused, her head snapping toward me like she'd been startled, but instead of answering, she gave a tight smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just not much sleep lately." I didn't buy it. There was something off about her response. Her voice was too high-pitched, too forced. I watched her fidget with the sleeve of her cardigan, her fingers trembling slightly. She was nervous, terrified even. And when she glanced toward the hallway that led to that locked door, I saw her eyes dart quickly away. It was subtle, but I caught it. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. She didn't say anything else. Instead, she turned and walked briskly into the kitchen, leaving me standing there, uncertain of what to do next. I watched her go, then turned back to the hallway. My gaze was drawn back to the locked door, almost as if it was calling to me. I moved toward it, slowly, tentatively. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was just curiosity. Or maybe I had started to sense that there was something deeply unsettling about this house. Something hidden just beyond my reach. Maybe I thought that if I could just figure out what it was, it would explain all the unease, all the strange behavior. The closer I got to the door, the stronger the feeling of dread became. I felt like I was stepping into the unknown, like whatever was on the other side was something I shouldn't see. But I had to. I had to know. I reached out to touch the door handle. It was cold, too cold for a door that had been in the house all this time. It felt like it had been locked away for years, untouched. As my hand rested on the handle, I heard something soft, almost imperceptible, a faint scraping sound coming from behind the door. I jerked my hand back. The noise stopped. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I was frozen, staring at that door, my mind racing. Should I open it? Should I find out what was behind it? Or was it better to leave it alone, to pretend like I hadn't even noticed? Before I could make a decision, I heard a voice, faint, distant. It was Malcolm's assistant again. "Everything okay?" she asked from the kitchen. I didn't answer right away. I took a step back, away from the door, my mind racing. Was it really her? Or was I imagining it? When I turned around, she was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, her expression unreadable. She was watching me, her eyes narrowed, like she knew exactly what I had been doing. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Yeah, just checking out the place. She didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. There was something in the way she was looking at me. It wasn't the same friendly face I'd seen earlier. It was colder, more distant. Her lips were pressed tight together, and her eyes seemed was like she was trying to keep a secret, but I had already uncovered too much. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if we were both waiting for something. But what? "Maybe we should get started," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but there was a hard edge to it now. "I'll show you what's left of his things." I nodded, still unsettled, but I didn't protest. I wasn't sure what I expected to find in that room, but there was no turning back now. I followed her down the hallway, back toward the living room, but as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something. The locked door lingered in my mind, the sound I'd heard behind it, the way everything had felt too still, too quiet. The assistant walked ahead of me, and I watched her shoulders stiffen as she turned the corner. She glanced back at me quickly, like she wanted to make sure I was following her, but then she looked away, as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. I knew she was hiding something, but what? I didn't have the answers, not yet, but I was going to find out. But that was just the beginning. I should have left. That's what I kept telling myself over and over as I followed her down the hallway. But there was something in the air, something pulling me forward, making it impossible to turn back. Maybe it was my curiosity, or maybe it was that nagging sense that I had already stumbled too far into something I wasn't meant to see. Either way, there was no turning back now. As I entered the living room, the assistant was already at the desk, flipping through some papers. Her movements were slow and methodical, almost too deliberate, as if she were avoiding something. Her eyes flickered nervously to the window every few seconds, and I could see her hands shaking as she rifled through the stack in front of her. I stood at the edge of the room, watching her, the weight of the silence growing thicker with every passing second. I wanted to ask her what was going on, what had happened to Malcolm, but the words wouldn't come. Something had shifted. The house felt different now, like the energy had changed. She finally glanced up at me, her face pale, her eyes wide. "There's not much left," she said softly, her voice cracking slightly. "Just these things, his personal items." I nodded, trying to ignore the way her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I tried to focus on the task. I needed to get this over with, to find out what had happened and why Malcolm had said what he did. But it wasn't the papers that caught my attention next. No, it was the faint sound I heard, almost a whisper, coming from behind me. The noise was so soft that at first I thought it was my imagination, but then it came again. A sharp scrape, followed by the sound of something or someone shifting in the shadows. My heart skipped a beat. I turned around, my body stiff with fear. The house was still and quiet, just like before, but something felt different. It was as if the walls themselves were breathing, drawing in a deep, quiet inhale, then holding it in. I scanned the room quickly, my eyes darting from corner to corner, but I saw nothing out of place, nothing that should have been there. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The assistant looked at me, her face drained of color. Her lips parted like she was going to say something, but then she closed them again. Her eyes darted to the far corner of the room where the shadows were deepest. Her shoulders tensed, and I saw her breathe in sharply, as if trying to steady herself. "No," she finally said, her voice thin. I didn't hear anything, but I knew she was lying. There was no way she hadn't heard it. The sound had been too distinct, too real. But she wasn't going to acknowledge it. She was avoiding it, just like she had been avoiding everything else. The way she'd been acting, too jittery, too on edge. It wasn't normal. She was hiding something, and I was sure it had to do with that locked room I'd seen earlier. I glanced at the hallway again, my pulse racing. It was almost as if the house had stopped being just a house. It was something else now, something alive, something that was aware of me, watching me, waiting for me to uncover whatever secret it was holding. I didn't want to go down that hallway. I didn't want to see what was behind that door. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that I had to. I had to find out what was happening, even if it meant walking straight into whatever darkness this house was hiding. The assistant didn't look at me as I moved toward the hallway. She kept her gaze fixed firmly on the papers in front of her, not acknowledging me at all. But I could feel her eyes on me, the weight of her attention pressing into my back, the tension between us palpable. I took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway, my footsteps echoing off the walls louder than I expected. The house felt colder now, and the air was thick with the same heavy silence that had consumed the living room. It was suffocating. I moved down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest with every step. The door was just ahead, standing there like an ominous monument waiting for me. When I reached it, I hesitated. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find. Maybe a hidden room full of secrets, maybe nothing at all. But as I reached for the handle again, I felt a sudden surge of dread, like a voice in my head screaming at me to turn back. I ignored it. I twisted the handle. It was locked, just like before. But this time, there was something different. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the hallway, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I stepped back quickly, my breath catching in my throat. And that's when I heard it. A low, guttural sound, like something moving behind the door. Something large and slow. It sounded almost like breathing, but deeper, unnatural. It was so loud, so close that I could feel it vibrating in my chest. My hand started shaking as I reached for the door again, pressing my ear to it. And that's when I realized the truth. It wasn't just the house that was making this noise, it was the room. The room itself was alive. The air around it was alive. It felt like there was something in there, something waiting, and it knew I was standing outside, just waiting for the moment I would step inside. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart pounded in my ears as I backed away from the door. My thoughts were jumbled. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Are you okay? The assistant's voice broke through the fog of panic in my mind. I turned to face her. She was standing in the hallway now, watching me with a look that was half fear, half something else. Something I couldn't quite place. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My mind was racing, my thoughts spinning in every direction. I wanted to ask her if she had heard it too, but I couldn't find the words. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning my face. "We should leave," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We shouldn't be here." I nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. I could feel the panic building inside me, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run, to get out of this house before whatever was behind that door, whatever it was, could get to me. But as I turned to head for the door, I heard something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, slow. They were coming from inside the room. I turned to the assistant, my breath shallow. "What's in there?" I asked, my voice trembling. Her eyes widened, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw true fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, I heard the footsteps again. Closer this time, louder. And then the door creaked open. Then came the real shock. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Everything in me screamed for me to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, my feet glued to the floor, my heart pounding in my chest, louder than anything else in the room. The door had opened. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even seen anyone near it, but it was slowly creaking open as though whatever was inside was taking its time to make its presence known. The air felt thick, suffocating. The cold that had started creeping in the moment I stood in front of that door had become unbearable, like icy fingers were closing around my throat. The sound of those footsteps, those slow, deliberate footsteps, had stopped, but I could still feel them. The ground beneath me seemed to tremble as if something huge, something monstrous was about to emerge. I turned to look at the assistant, but she wasn't there. She had backed away, her face ashen, her hands shaking so badly that she had to grip the wall for support. She looked at me as if she was seeing me for the first time, her wide, terrified eyes full of something. Guilt? Regret? I couldn't place it, but whatever it wasn't a look that reassured me. Her lips trembled, her body shaking. "You shouldn't have done this," she whispered hoarsely. "You shouldn't have come here. You don't understand." I felt the pressure in my chest tighten. "What do you mean? What's in there? What's going on?" She didn't answer me. She didn't even move. She just stood there, her breath shallow, her gaze fixed on the darkening doorway. There was something wrong about her. Something different. Like a switch had been flipped inside her. The fear was gone from her face, replaced with something colder, something darker. And then, just as I thought I might lose control, a figure appeared in the doorway. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, my mind playing tricks on me, but it wasn't. It was a person, or something that looked like one. I didn't know if it was a hallucination or some nightmare I had fallen into, but I could see them clearly, too clearly. The figure in the doorway was dressed in what looked like old, faded clothes, worn and frayed at the edges. They didn't move, but they stared at me. Their face was obscured by shadow, but their eyes, they were wide open, unnaturally wide. There was no human warmth in those eyes, just an endless void, black and empty. My breath hitched in my throat as a sense of dread washed over me. My body felt cold, paralyzed. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It was like the world had gone silent, like the house had swallowed every sound but the beating of my own heart. I wanted to run, to escape, but my legs refused to move. I turned to look at the assistant, but she was no longer standing where she had been. She was gone, vanished. I felt a sharp pang of fear twist in my gut. I knew, deep down, that whatever was happening wasn't just happening to me. It wasn't just this house, it was something bigger, something much more terrifying. The figure in the doorway took a step forward, step by slow step. It was walking toward me, but I couldn't see the person clearly. The light that should have illuminated them only seemed to darken as they drew nearer. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out of there, but my body refused to obey. I could feel the walls pressing in on me as if the house itself was trying to trap me. I couldn't think. I couldn't act. All I could do was watch as this thing, this being, moved toward me. The air grew heavier with every step it took, the cold becoming more intense, more suffocating. My teeth were chattering, my body trembling with terror, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. Whatever this thing was, it was coming for me. And then, with one final deliberate step, the figure stopped just in front of me. It was so close that I could feel its presence, like it was breathing the same air I was. My chest tightened painfully, my heart racing so fast I thought I might faint. The air smelled different now. Foul, rancid, like decay, like death. I could feel it. It wasn't human. I didn't need to touch it to know. The energy radiating from it was wrong, unnatural. The silence in the room grew deafening. It was like the house had completely stopped breathing, waiting for the next thing to happen. Then, the figure leaned forward, and I heard something in my head. A voice. It was quiet at first, faint, like a whisper at the edge of my mind. "They've been planning your death, you know." The words echoed in my head, their meaning washing over me in waves. My pulse hammered in my ears, and I could feel my knees buckling, threatening to give way. The voice, that voice, it sounded like Malcolm's. It sounded like him, but not. It was as if it was mocking me, taunting me. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure took a step back, retreating into the darkness of the room, leaving nothing but the lingering sense of coldness. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I couldn't move. My mind was racing, but it couldn't keep up with the chaos that had just unfolded. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in around me. I had no answers, just this overwhelming sense that I had walked into something I was never supposed to see. I tried to breathe, but my chest felt tight, suffocated by the weight of what had just occurred. They had been planning his death. The thought repeated in my mind, over and over like a sick mantra. And in that moment, I understood. I understood everything. I understood that whatever had happened to Malcolm, whatever had brought him here, it wasn't a coincidence. It was all part of something bigger, something darker, something that had been set in motion long before I'd ever stepped foot in this house. And that's when everything changed. I should have run. The thought kept circling in my mind, over and over again, as I stood there in the middle of the room, my legs shaking, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. But I didn't move. My body wouldn't let me. It was like something had locked me in place, some invisible force that refused to let me take the first step toward the door. My heart was pounding so loudly that I thought I might pass out from the sheer pressure of it. The air was thick, oppressive, like it was pressing in on me from all sides. My thoughts were scattered, disjointed. I couldn't process what had just happened. I had heard the voice. I had heard it clear as day. It sounded like Malcolm's voice, but it didn't feel like him. It felt like something else entirely. Something darker. Something that had taken over his form. Twisted it into something unrecognizable. The image of the figure standing in front of me, its hollow eyes and malevolent presence, was burned into my mind. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, unsure of what to do. Should I leave? Should I try to make sense of this? Every part of me screamed to get out, to run as far away from this place as I could. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed by fear, my body refusing to obey my mind. I could hear my breath, ragged and shallow, like I was suffocating. And then I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible noise behind me. I turned, terrified that whatever that thing was, it was coming back. But it wasn't the figure from before. It was the assistant. She was standing at the doorway, her eyes wide, her face pale. She looked as if she had seen a ghost, her body trembling uncontrollably. But she didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me, her lips trembling as though she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I could see it in her eyes. Fear. Real, raw fear. I wanted to ask her what was happening, what had happened to Malcolm, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was too tight. My voice was gone. She took a step forward, but then stopped, her eyes darting toward the hallway. Her body language screamed that she wanted to leave, that she was scared out of her mind. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the only one who had been caught up in whatever this was. She looked at me one last time, her expression haunted, and whispered, "We need to get out of here." But before I could respond, she turned and ran. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. If I'm being honest, I don't know how I'm still here. I don't know why I didn't run when I had the chance, when every part of me was screaming to get out. But I couldn't. I didn't. And now, I don't know how to escape what's following me. It's still out there, waiting. It's not just in that house. It's in my head, in the shadows, in the corners of my mind where I can't reach it. I keep hearing that voice, Malcolm's voice, and the footsteps. They're always behind me now. It's like it's watching me, waiting for me to slip up. And the worst part? I don't think I can escape it. Not anymore. If I disappear after this, you'll know why. I'm not sure I can outrun what's coming. But I'll try. I have to. Because whatever's out there, it's not done with me yet.